All right, Joshua chapter 22. This, of course, is post-conquest of the land, taking out the strongholds as they went through the military campaign and subdued at least the places of the stronger resistance. And Israel was successful in going through this, sticking together as a nation, remaining faithful to God on the whole. And there's a great blessing that they have enjoyed and that is yet before them. And Joshua 22 down to 24 deals with this idea of maintaining that blessing, maintaining the right relationship with God. And so we're going to see some admonitions, of course, and then some actions that they take to make sure that they remain true to the Lord. So let's begin here, Joshua 22, verses 1 through 9. Who will read that for us? Joshua 22, 1 through 9. Ron?
And Joshua called the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh, and said to them, "You have kept all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, and have obeyed my voice in all that I have commanded you. You have not left your brethren these many days up to this day, but have kept the charge of the commandment of the Lord your God. And now the Lord your God has given rest to your brethren, as he promised them. Now therefore, return and go to your tents and to the land of your possession, which Moses the servant of the Lord gave you on the other side of the Jordan. But take careful heed to do the commandment and the law which Moses the servant of the Lord commanded you, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments, to hold fast to him, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul." So Joshua blessed them and sent them away, and they went to their tents. Now to the half the tribe of Manasseh Moses had given a possession in Bashan, but to the other half of it Joshua gave a possession among their brethren on the other side of the Jordan, westward and inward. When Joshua sent them away to their tents, he blessed them. And he spoke to them, saying, return with much riches to your tents, with very much livestock, with silver, with gold, with bronze, with iron, and with very much clothing. Divide the spoils of your enemies with your brethren. So the children of Reuben and the children of Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh returned and departed from the children of Israel to Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan, to go to the country of Gilead, to the land of their possession, which they had obtained according to the word of the Lord by the hand of Moses.
All right, so dealing with those 2.5 tribes that were from the east side of the Jordan that had been given that land, defeating Sihon and Og and so on. And so addressing them as he's sending them back home to fully settle in and take their possession. Now, one of the things that he says in verse 3 is, you have not left your brethren these many days. But what had they done honorably and faithfully? And what did this mean? What had they experienced?
They had fought with them. They had gone over to the battle and spent however long it took accomplishing that with them. So they'd shown that they still considered themselves brethren with the same interests, the same goals in serving God.
Right. Remember, they had left their families over on the east side, well, for you guys, on the east side of Jordan. And it talked about how that 40,000 of their men had gone with the main camp of Israel to go and to fight this battle and these wars that they were involved in. So you've got their families still over there. They had been away from their families. As we mentioned before, it could be that they campaigned during what's considered the campaigning season, from the springtime into the fall, but usually the ancient armies wouldn't go to war during the winter, just too many issues and problems with that. Now, whether they went back and visited their families during that time or not, I don't know. But you think about, we said this was like a 7.5-year campaign they went on. This has been a long time. And they've been through a lot, and they had seen a lot. And they were shoulder to shoulder, fighting side by side, just as they had committed to when they were granted that land on the east side of Jordan. So they had honorably kept their vow, their duty, to be with their brethren, to help them to take the main portion, of course, of Canaan land. They faced the same hazards and hardships through these many years. And now it's time to return home, time to return back to their families, time to settle down and begin their life anew. Because remember, they had been in the desert before this for 40 years, and the bulk of these men had grown up during that time in the desert, and they were essentially nomads out there. Now it's time to settle down. Now it's time to go and plant your crops and do all those things. And so this would have been a great time of joy, of relief for them to head back. What do they head back with? Verse 8. Ron.
It says that they had headed back with the spoils of their enemies. And so they had all of those things that are described there in that verse, riches and livestock and precious metals.
Okay.
As well as very much clothing.
All right. So let's break this down just a little bit. Just to note here, he says you're going to go back with much riches to your tents. So you're taking all this home, the spoils of war. They have livestock, of course, animals, whether that's oxen, sheep, goats, whatever it is that they may have that they have captured here. It says silver and gold, and we get that. Yeah, I want to take silver and gold with me. Bronze, iron, okay, those are useful. Those are going to be things you use in your tools, your implements, maybe things around the house. Maybe you make swords with it, stuff like that. But then very much clothing. If you thought about today going to war, all right, hopefully we don't want to, but if you thought about that, would you think about taking people's clothing? Paul?
Would you say that's more than they needed?
No, I would not.
Typically, we would not think of that. But Stephen, is it correct that the clothing that they had when they left Egypt was the clothing that they had through the wilderness because God said it did not wear out? So now that they are in the promised land, it needs to be replaced.
That's a part of it because, yes, it does specifically note that while they're in the desert, their sandals didn't wear out, their clothes didn't wear out. So they had very limited of that through those 40 years, saying they didn't have to produce any of that through those 40 years, but they go into this land and they get that clothing. So that's going to help just on a practical side of things. The other side of it is something we've lost in our modern times is how difficult, how expensive clothing is to make. Like if you make it one at a time, they didn't have mass-produced factories spitting out, 10,000 pair of jeans a week. They had to make it by hand. They had to take the material, they had to put it on to the loom and whatever. I don't know all the process. Maybe somebody does, but they had to weave the fabric. They had to take that fabric, they had to cut it up, sew it together, do all that kind of stuff. So clothing was extremely expensive. So when it talks about riches and clothing being involved in that, we don't maybe grasp that, but it was very, very valuable. So that's part of what's mentioned there. What's ironic? Anybody notice something ironic about this that we read at the beginning of, or near the beginning of Joshua? There was a man involved with silver and gold and clothing. Achan. Achan took of the spoils of Jericho that was specifically forbidden. He could have been one of the ones, if he had just refrained, if he had just said, yeah, I see that, it looks appealing, but I'm going to leave that alone. He could have been one of these people going back with very much riches, way more than what he had taken at the beginning. He could have enjoyed it with his family. but he couldn't refrain himself. He didn't refrain himself, I should say. So here they are. They're very blessed. They've been with their brethren. Joshua tells them to go back, take heed to the commandment of the Lord, verse 5, stay faithful to him, and basically he tells them Godspeed as they head back to the east side of the Jordan. All right, one of the things that can be a problem, as we see here, they're going back with much riches. What can riches do to people?
Simply can corrupt your thinking in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are things they didn't have before. And so, yeah, more?
Well, I was going to say, Stephen, that, we are told not to place our heart or our desire in uncertain riches because they're not lasting. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's also the spiritual comparison for us that these things are going to pass away. But the things that are eternal is where we should set our affections.
Exactly right. And here they are going back with these great possessions. They're going to settle down. They're transitioning from a war footing and the stress that comes with that. But with that stress, there was a very real focus that they had before them. And now that's removed. And there could be a temptation to complacency and just being lazy and sitting around and just indulging yourself. And so they're being admonished here, don't do that. Go back, stay faithful to the Lord, stay focused, doing his will. And so they should go back and enjoy those things, but don't forget about your commitment to God Almighty. All right, anything else down through verse 9? So verse 10, I tell you what, let's read verses 10 through 20. I know it's a little bit longer, but 10 through 20. Who will get that for us? Philip?
When they came to the region of the Jordan, which is in the land of Canaan, the children of Reuben, the children of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh built an altar there by the Jordan, a great impressive altar. Now the children of Israel heard someone say, Behold, the children of Reuben, the children of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh have built an altar on the frontier land of the land of Canaan in the region of the Jordan, on the children of Israel's side. And when the children of Israel heard of it, the whole congregation of the children of Israel gathered together at Shiloh to go to war against them. Then the children of Israel sent Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, to the children of Reuben, to the children of Gad, and to the half-tribe of Manasseh, into the land of Gilead. And with him 10 rulers, one ruler each, for the chief house of every tribe of Israel. And each one was the head of the house of his father among the divisions of Israel. Then they came to the children of Reuben, to the children of Gad, and to the half-tribe of Manasseh, to the land of Gilead. And they spoke with them, saying, Thus says the whole congregation of the Lord, What treachery is this that you have committed against the God of Israel, to turn away this day from following the Lord, and that you have built for yourselves an altar, that you might rebel this day against the Lord? Is the iniquity of Peor not enough for us, from which we are not cleansed till this day, although there was a plague on the congregation of the Lord? But that you must turn away this day from following the Lord. And it shall be, if you rebel today against the Lord, that tomorrow he will be angry with the whole congregation of Israel. Nevertheless, if the land of your possession is unclean, then cross over to the land of the possession of the Lord, where the Lord's tabernacle stands, and take possession among us. But do not rebel against the Lord, nor rebel against us, by building yourselves an altar besides the altar of the Lord our God. Did not Achan the son of Zariah commit a trespass, and he accursed them? And wrath fell on all the congregation of Israel. And that man did not perish alone in his iniquity.
All right. So question number 1 on this lesson I had asked, why did the western tribes almost go to war with the eastern tribes? What's at issue here? Okay, the altar they had built, And in verse 10, what kind of altar is that?
Great and impressive.
New King James says great and impressive. What do other translations have? Imposing size. The NASB has a large altar in appearance. And what it was is it was patterned after, evidently, the altar at the tabernacle. The altar of burnt offering was 5 cubits by 5 cubits, well, 7.5 feet by 7.5 feet, and 4.5 feet tall, so about yay tall. So it's pretty big. Well, this one's built on a grander scale, those same relative dimensions, but bigger. And as we get down into this, we understand why they built it. Initially, it isn't understood, but you can understand why they would build it so big. It wasn't built for use in offering sacrifices. It was built as a memorial. Just like we do our memorials today, we outsize our memorials, right? Think of the Lincoln Memorial. I've never been there. Maybe some of you have. And it's like there's a person, the image of Lincoln carved out, and it's just huge, right? And we do that. The Mount Rushmore, those big heads up on the rock. We just build things big that are memorials to be recognizable, impressive, to really drive home, here's something important, significant, worthy of note, and remembering. So think of it that way. Well, the rest of Israel, the 9.5 tribes on the western side, perceived it as a violation of God's law. They think, well, here's a problem that we have. And what are they ready to do? Verse 12. What's that?
Go to war.
Ready to go to war. What does that mean? What are they ready to do?
Ready to fight for what they believe.
Ready to fight for what they believe? Anything more specific, Jim?
They would have gone and wiped them out.
Okay, wiped them out, which means, on the practical side, kill them. They're ready to shed blood over this. Hey, if this is what they've done, we're going to kill them because we're not going to tolerate this. So, question number 2 was, how was war averted? How was this avoided here? And what did they do, what did they not do? Philip.
They sent a delegation with the son of the priest and 10 leaders from the tribes that were on the west side of Jordan to confirm what their suspicions were before they went all out.
Okay, they're going down there to have this, as you said, I forget your exact wording, but like a diplomatic or delegation, I think it's like a delegation, go and address this. Figure out what's happening here. It's interesting to me, they said, we're going to go to war, but they didn't immediately arm up and march out and attack and fall on them and then go, okay, we took care of it, right? They send this delegate. There's great wisdom here. We'll talk about that more in just a little bit. So they send Phinehas and others with him. Who is this Phinehas? Verse 13. Grandson of Aaron. Why is he important in the biblical narrative, especially the children of Israel for perhaps the past 2 decades or more? Okay, he's in line to be high priest. I'm not sure that Eleazar is dead, but he is in the priestly line. There's something else that he did that's specifically noted in the book of Numbers. Yes. Remember when the Moabites came and got some of the Israelite men involved in idolatry and fornication with the women, that there was one man that was so bold in Numbers 25 that he brought a Midianite woman before the children of Israel and passed by the tabernacle, went into his tent, and Phinehas is the one that took a spear and stuck them both, killed them. What does that tell you about Phinehas? And he stopped the plague in that action, by the way. What does that tell you about him?
He had zeal for righteousness in God.
Exactly. He was committed to the Lord and to honoring his will, and he wasn't going to put up with any foolishness, right? He just was not going to do that. So Phinehas is on this delegation. They're not going to push him over. He knew what was right. He's going to declare and stand for here's what's right. And so they send him out there with these other men, these other leaders that are there. And this is in keeping with the law. Ron.
Stephen, in verse 17, the iniquity of Peor, doesn't that tie back to Balaam
Yes.
and Balak and the counsel that he gave Balak, and the things that you just described were all a result of that?
Exactly. And they bring these things up and they say, hey, look at what happened in the past. We don't want that to repeat here. Exactly right. And them going down to have this conversation, this delegation. Hold your place there in Joshua 22. Let's go back to Deuteronomy 13. Deuteronomy chapter 13. And let's read verses 12 to 15 here. Deuteronomy 13, 12 to 15. Who's got that for us, Carter?
If you hear in one of your cities which the Lord your God is giving you to dwell there, that certain worthless fellows have gone out among you and have drawn away from the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods, which you have not known. Then you shall inquire and make search and ask diligently, and behold, if it be true and certain that such an abomination has been done among you, you shall surely put the inhabitants of the city to the sword, devoting it to destruction, all who are in it and its cattle with the edge of the sword.
Okay. What is this here? What are they supposed to do if they hear, hey, there's corrupt men, there's evil men over here in this particular city? What are they supposed to do? Investigate.
Go and confirm what they're hearing.
What do we call this in our modern concept and perception of law? Or maybe at least it's related to it, but innocent until proven guilty. We're not just going to jump up and go attack the city because we heard that they're doing this. Go investigate. Now, if it's confirmed, yeah, there's things you need to do. And that's what's happening in Joshua 22. They're following the law. We've heard this is what's happening with that altar. This is what we're concerned about. We're going to go and find that out. We need to have testimony, if you will, in this case. So we see, to me, it's beautiful to see this going all the way back and understanding our nation's laws founded upon these biblical principles. Hey, you can't just go and attack someone because you heard they're doing something wrong. You can't convict someone just because you just heard or thought or perceived something bad was happening. So go investigate that. All right, any other thoughts, Ron?
What you just mentioned, Stephen, is the trap sometimes we're getting into perception versus reality.
Right.
As you just said, the things that we sometimes perceive, but how do they align with what is factual and truthful?
Exactly right. Yeah, and we have a huge problem with that, of course, in our modern society with all the insanity going on. But this is biblical. This is a biblical process and pattern that's laid out for us. And so the delegation goes, as we mentioned, they lay out their concerns, and the concern was any altar besides the one that is at the tabernacle is treachery. It's a violation of the law of God. And this simply reflects the fact that they're committed to keeping God's law as a nation. They're not going to tolerate departure from the law. That incident that Ron had mentioned a while ago there in verse 17, the iniquity of Peor, that wasn't the majority of the people that got involved. It was a minority. And then the other example they give is what? Achan. How many were involved with his iniquity?
All of his family.
Yeah, him and his family, but that's just like a handful out of this nation of like 1.5 million to 2 million people. And so who did it affect? The whole nation. It affected all of us. It stopped their progress in taking that land when they went up against Ai or I the first time. So they're saying, look, you guys getting involved in something, it's going to come back on all of us. And we can't just let that happen. So it had to be addressed. And one of the things they offer, verse 19, is what? I think this is very generous or high-minded of them. Philip.
Basically says that if you don't like your land anymore, then come over to Jordan and take possession of this land with us.
Yeah, we come into our territory. We're not so jealous of our allotment that we would just tell y'all to deal with whatever you got to do. You're our brethren. You come in. If there's an issue over there, come over here. So one of the things you see is this priority of, we're going to keep God's law. We want you to keep God's law, and you need to keep God's law. Come in and share with us. Let's stick together on this. Philip.
These men have just been fighting with them, trying to take that land for 7.5 years. So, I mean, you can kind of see them going through the process of any and every diplomatic solution. I mean, this is their brethren. I mean, these guys fought with them. I mean, they don't want to have to kill them.
Right. They do not want to go to war. So whatever we need to do to fix this and to keep sin from happening, we're willing to do, is essentially the message they're giving to them. And that's a beautiful thing, that as brethren, looking out for each other. Right? All right, any other thoughts there? So let's jump down a little bit, verses 21 through 29. Who will read that? Joshua 22, 21, 29. Go ahead, Zach.
Then the people of Reuben, people of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh said in answer to the heads of the families of Israel, the mighty one, God the Lord, the mighty one, God the Lord, He knows. And let Israel itself know. If it was in rebellion or in breach of faith against the Lord, do not spare us today for building an altar to turn away from following the Lord. Or if we did so, to offer burnt offerings, or grain offerings, or peace offerings on it, may the Lord Himself take vengeance. No, but we did it from fear that in time to come your children might say to our children, what have you to do with the Lord, the God of Israel? For the Lord has made the Jordan a boundary between us and you people of Reuben and people of Gad. You have no portion in the Lord. So your children might make our children cease to worship the Lord. Therefore we said, let us now build an altar, not for burnt offering, not for sacrifice, but to be a witness between us and you, and between our generations after us, that we do perform the service of the Lord in His presence with our burnt offerings and sacrifices and peace offerings. So your children will not say to our children in time to come, you have no portion in the Lord. And we thought, if this should be said to us or to our descendants in time to come, we should say, behold, the copy of the altar of the Lord, which our fathers made, not for burnt offerings nor for sacrifice, but to be a witness between us and you. Far be it from us that we should rebel against the Lord and turn away this day from following the Lord by building an altar for burnt offering, grain offering, or sacrifice, other than the altar of the Lord our God that stands before His tabernacle.
All right. So what's the upshot of what they tell them in response to, hey, this is a problem, what's going on here? It's not what you think. Let us tell you what it is. And what is that purpose? They claim innocence. They say, we didn't build it to do an altar of burnt offering. It's not a rival or an alternate option to us, going to the tabernacle, offering burnt offerings there. It's not all that.
It's a relic, as they say, to witness that
Right. Nancy, you have more?
Well, I thought it was perceptive of them to look to the future to how the next generation might look at where they are as opposed to where the bulk of Israel is. And so their concern was for their children and recognizing the tie between them. I mean, they have it because they fought in this land together, but their children aren't going to be at war like they were at war taking the land. So they aren't going to have that same interrelationship. So I really thought it was perceptive of those that generation of men to say we need to do something so that our children are preserved as the children of Israel as well.
Yes, very good. Cruz?
I think it was also meant to be a witness for both sides of the Jordan that they once, both tribes worshiped the same God. For those future generations to not lose sight of that.
Yes, we've got that tie in the Lord together. Yes, exactly right. So, they mention, it was mentioned by Ron, that there's this border between them, this river. And rivers, of course, act as natural borders. You'll see a lot of state lines that follow a river. And so you may think, and the perception they were concerned about is thinking that we are a separate people, because this isn't what you would consider an imaginary border. Like the line between North and South Carolina, I think for the most part is just arbitrary, just like here's where we're going to draw it. Or like the state of Tennessee, you can look at that, it follows this parallel and that parallel in this little ridge line along the mountains and I think the Mississippi River in the west, right? So anyways, this isn't arbitrary. Like, this is actually a barrier of travel and spending, being around each other. It is. And it could be perceived down the road that we are supposed to be separated from each other. So we built this thing as a reminder for the generations to come, we belong together. And to remind your people, we belong to you, and our people, they belong to you. So a great reminder of it there for those future generations. And they are emphatic about the fact they're not turning away from the Lord. In fact, in verse 23, what do they say? The latter part of 23.
They're saying that let the Lord God require an account of us. They want to be held accountable for holding to this position of unity.
And they're essentially saying, let God strike us if this is not our intent. If we have corrupted this, if we've done something wrong, if this is an issue, then we ourselves want God to come down on us and fix this problem. Maybe it's strike with a plague, things like that, but they're saying we want God to act, because that's not what we're doing here. And so a claim of innocence in this. Let's read verses 30 to 34, please. 30 to 34. Who will grab that for us? Go ahead, Josh.
Phineas the priest and the leaders of the community, the heads of the clans of the Israelites, heard what Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh had to say. They were pleased. And Phineas, son of Eleazar the priest, said to Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, "Today we know that the Lord is with us, because we have not been unfaithful to the Lord in this matter. Now you have rescued the Israelites from the Lord's hand." And Phineas, son of Eleazar the priest, and the leaders returned to Canaan from their meeting with the Reubenites and Gadites and Gilead, and reported to the Israelites. They were glad to hear the report and praised God. And they thought no more about going to war against them to devastate the country where the Reubenites and the Gadites lived. And the Reubenites and the Gadites gave an altar this name: "The witness between us and the Lord is God."
Okay. So what's the outcome? Sorry if somebody said it, I didn't hear it. What's the outcome? No war. And is there anything a little more than that? What's that? Yes, they give the glory to God. there's this peace and harmony. And to Kayla's point, there's no rupture in this nation. And so you think about this, that there was this spark right there that could have ignited and it all just blown up. But instead, they send this delegation. They have this very frank exchange. We got a problem. Here's what's happened in the past. And though it doesn't explicitly lay it out, I think those 2.5 tribes understand we're getting ready to come after you if this isn't fixed. We're innocent. It's not what you think. So they don't bow up against them. They don't say, well, who are you? Why do you think you have the right to say anything to us? Don't you know we've been with you these past 7.5 years, and we were in the desert before that, and we know all these lessons. Who are you to come over here and get on to us? It wasn't that. Everybody kept their heads. They had a frank exchange. We're innocent. Here's why we're innocent. Here's what's really going on. Okay, we believe you. We understand that. We think that's actually a good thing. And there's peace. There's harmony. What lessons are here?
Well, one lesson, Stephen, is, as you pointed out, is that when we have doubts about a position, is to go and reason together and examine, as we say, do a case study here. Okay, what is before us? Because as you mentioned, the end state was better than the beginning state, and they were pleased and happy with one another. So a very favorable outcome came from all of this. But it would not have occurred had they not had the mind to go and reason together.
Yes, exactly right. Cruz, do you have something?
Yes, both sides were direct and clear with what the issue at hand. But ultimately, it was approached with a sense of love. Helping the other brother come back to what was perceived as the right path, right? So just understanding that.
Yeah, they go to him and they don't want to go to war. They really didn't have an axe to grind here. They just wanted clarification, and when that came, everything worked out. It was good. Zach?
Could we apply this to a smaller scale, like on an individual level, like Proverbs 18:17, the one who gives his case first seems right until another comes and examines it? How much enmity and anxiety can be avoided if the whole matter is discovered, even in the most private of settings, and then maybe even the Matthew 18 context of let's figure out what's going on first before this becomes like a war, where action needs to be taken. And so there might be some parallels there, at least from this historic account of Joshua 22 to the personal or family church context.
Yes, there are principles in here that we can apply individually, we can apply as a congregation, we can apply as families. There are misunderstandings. That's what this boils down to. Somebody took action, other people looked at that, and from one perspective, they just completely misunderstood what was going on. And it's not that it's their fault for misunderstanding what's going on. It's just we see things and we're like, wait a second, that doesn't look right. Okay, you've got that. They don't attack immediately. They go down to find out. We misperceive each other, the things that we do. Congregations misperceive each other and the things that are done in a congregation. You just have a conversation about that. Hey, here's what's going on. Here's why it's going on. Well, okay, we understand that better now. So glad we had this talk. God be with you. God be with you. Let's do our thing. So many things there that we can learn about that, to strive for unity, strive for peace, communication, a conversation, and in the end, there's that harmony, and praise to God because of it. Any other thoughts? All right, let's jump down now to chapter 23. This is one of Joshua's farewell addresses. He really, I think, 23, 24, he has a couple of them here, a little bit different context with each of them. But let's notice this here. He gathers the leaders of the tribes in verses 1 and 2. And let's read verses 3 through 11, please. Joshua 23, 3 through 11. Who will grab that for us? Go ahead, Carter.
You have seen all that the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake, for it is the Lord your God who has fought for you. Behold, I have allotted to you as an inheritance for your tribes those nations that remain, along with all the nations that I have already cut off from the Jordan to the great sea in the west. The Lord your God will push them back before you and drive them out of your sight, and you shall possess their land, just as the Lord your God promised you. Therefore, be very strong to keep and to do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, turning aside from it neither to the right hand nor to the left, that you may not mix with these nations remaining among you, or make mention of the names of their gods, or swear by them, or serve them, or bow down to them. But you shall cling to the Lord your God, just as you have done to this day. For the Lord has driven out before you great and strong nations, and as for you, no man has been able to stand before you to this day. One man of you puts to flight 1,000, since it is the Lord your God who fights for you, just as he promised you. Be very careful, therefore love the Lord your God.
All right. So he's gathered these leaders, and in the context, some see it, and I would lean in this direction. This is the 9.5 on the western side. He had the talk with the 2.5. He sent them home. He had all that unfold in 22, but they've gone on home, and this is the 9.5 on the western side that he's dealing with at this point. But be that as it may, he points out you've had great success with this invasion, and God would continue to be with you and drive out the inhabitants. In question 3, I'd ask, how would the tribes, it should be tribes, be successful in the land? How are they going to prosper and do well and all of that? Okay, Ron, do you have something?
Yeah, he tells them to keep all the things in the law and to keep from all association with things of idolatrous nature of the people that they left behind them, and of course to hold to the Lord and be diligent to themselves to love the Lord their God.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's interesting to me, in verse 6, he says, keep and do all that is written in the book of the law. In verse 11, the way he states that is love the Lord your God. There is no distinction. Right. Keeping his law is loving him. Loving him is keeping his law. It's one and the same. And so, when they get into this land, and especially you fast forward, and it's been talked about here, there are still Canaanites in the land. There are still people there who are practicing idolatry. So there's going to be pressure. There's going to be this allurement for them to get involved in that idolatry, because it's going to still be all around them. So he's giving them a stern warning here, don't do it. When he says don't even make mention of the name of their gods, it's not the idea Baal is a false god. I just violated that. It's them talking about Baal in a favorable way, or acknowledging or trying to affirm Baal as an actual god or whatever. It's on the positive side, because we go through the Old Testament and we see that they constantly condemn these false idols, the Ashtoreths, the Molechs, all of that. But don't make mention of them. Don't swear by them. Do not serve them. Do not bow down to them. It could be they get in there and they see how these Canaanites are successful, raising their crops. They're very wealthy. Well, is that Baal doing it for them? My crops didn't do so well this year. Well, maybe I need to switch over to Baal worship and follow that. Me and my wife, we're not able to have children that guy, that Canaanite over there, well, he's got 10 children. What's going on with me? What's wrong? God's not blessed me. Maybe I need to throw my loyalty to Baal. Don't give in to that pressure, that allurement that's there. The Israelites were an oddity in the ancient world. What set them apart from their neighbors, from the Canaanites or anybody else? Monotheism. These other people are polytheists. They believed in many gods. Israel's monotheist. There's one God, one nature of God. Right? Anything else set them apart? Everything that happened at Sinai. What happened at Sinai? Go ahead. Okay, their God's real. The rest of them are totally fake. And what happened down at Sinai? Thou shalt not. You had this law revealed that was their standard that set them apart from everybody else. And it was a strict moral code they were to follow. And then on top of that strict moral code, they had these ceremonial laws that any of us who've read through there know it was very exacting, very stringent, right? All these things. Well, you had to wash this. You had leprosy. You had to go through this process. A woman in her impurity had to go through this process. After childbirth, this and that and the other. And you have all these things they had to do. Well, those people, they weren't required. They could just make up what they want to do and do it. So it set them apart, and there may be this temptation, hey, I'd rather go live free over there. No, don't do that. Stick to God's law. Don't go to the right. Don't go to the left. As was mentioned a while ago. Ron, do you have something?
Yes, in addition to the law, that brought them into a covenant relationship with God, and they were children according to the promise that was given to them. So they had those things that bound them together as a nation rather than power or might of a man.
Yes, exactly right. And he notes there, particularly verses 9 through 11, that there is strength and power in serving God. He's on your side. He's going to be fighting for you. He'll be helping you out in these things as you live in that land. And so be sure to maintain your love for the Lord your God. All right. Lord willing, we'll pick up there next week and we'll finish out Joshua 23:24.